crisp Tuesday morning in Orlando, Florida, when 24-year-old Jennifer Kesse seemed to vanish into thin air. One moment, she was making plans for the week ahead, speaking with her boyfriend late into the night, and the next, she was gone. No signs of a struggle in her apartment, no cries for help, no witnesses, just silence. What followed was a case that has haunted her family, her friends, and investigators for nearly 2 decades. A mystery that begins with a young woman full of life and ends with questions that remain unanswered. It began like any other night. January 23rd, 2006 was a Monday in Orlando, Florida. And for 24-year-old Jennifer Joyce Kesse, life felt steady, predictable, and full of promise. She had just returned from a weekend trip with her boyfriend, a man she adored and trusted, and she was preparing for the week ahead. But no one knew that those hours, filled with ordinary moments like unpacking her suitcase and chatting on the phone, would be the last time anyone close to her would ever hear her voice. By the next morning, Jennifer would be gone, leaving behind a mystery that still haunts everyone who knew her. To understand the weight of this disappearance, you have to know who Jennifer was. She wasn't a drifter, she wasn't careless, and she certainly wasn't someone who would just walk away from her life. Jennifer was born on May 20th, 1981 in New Jersey, the first child of Drew and Joyce Kesse. From the very beginning, she stood out, bright, motivated, and confident. Friends and family describe her as the kind of person who had her life together, the type of woman who always thought 2 steps ahead. She grew up alongside her younger brother, Logan, in a family that valued closeness, honesty, and hard work. Drew and Joyce often speak about how Jennifer had this magnetic presence. She wasn't loud, but people noticed her. She was disciplined, responsible, and yet warm and funny. She had the type of personality that drew people in and kept them close. By the time she graduated from high school, Jennifer had already set her sights on a future in Florida. She enrolled at the University of Central Florida, one of the largest universities in the country, where she studied finance. She thrived in the independence of college life, but never drifted from her family. In fact, she called them almost every day, and they visited often. Her bond with her parents and brother was unshakable, and that bond would later fuel their tireless fight for answers. Jennifer graduated in 2003 and quickly built the kind of life many dream of at her age. She was hired as a finance manager for Central Florida Investments, a timeshare company where she excelled. She was smart with her money, dedicated to her career, and determined to stand on her own. In fact, she had recently achieved a milestone that made her entire family proud. She bought her very first home, a 2-bedroom condominium in a gated community called Mosaic at Millennia, just a few miles from downtown Orlando. This condo symbolized everything Jennifer had worked for. She wasn't just renting an apartment. She was investing in her future, creating a space that was hers. Friends recall how excited she was to decorate it, to make it feel like home. The Mosaic complex itself was modern and attractive, with a pool, security, and a convenient location near the Millennium Mall. On the surface, it seemed like the perfect place for a young professional to live. But the complex was still under construction in many areas, which meant there were contractors and day laborers constantly on site. Jennifer as careful and observant as she was, noticed the way some of them looked at her when she walked to and from her car. She later mentioned it to family and friends. The stares, the comments under their breath. She didn't consider it an immediate danger, but it bothered her enough to mention it more than once. Outside of her professional and independent life, Jennifer was deeply in love. She had been dating her boyfriend, Rob Allen, for about a year. Their relationship was long distance. Rob lived in Fort Lauderdale, about 3 hours away, but they made it work with phone calls, weekend visits, and plans for the future. They had just returned from a romantic getaway in St. Croix, a trip that left Jennifer glowing with happiness. On the night of January 23rd, she spoke to Rob on the phone one last time before bed. It was nothing unusual, just the kind of everyday conversation couples share, planning to talk again in the morning. Neither of them knew it would be the last conversation they'd ever have. Jennifer's life, by all accounts, was steady and full of potential. She was young, ambitious, financially independent, and loved. She had close friends, a supportive family, and a career that was just beginning to flourish. She was not someone looking to escape her circumstances. She was building a life, brick by brick, with a confidence that impressed everyone around her. But all of that, the career, the condo, the relationship, the sense of safety, would come crashing down within hours. By the morning of January 24th, Jennifer Kesse's carefully built life would be ripped apart by a mystery that still feels as sharp and unsettling today as it did then. And it all began the moment she stepped out of her condo for what should have been just another ordinary day. The morning of January 24th, 2006 began like any other for Jennifer. She was a creature of habit, structured, organized, and always punctual. Those who knew her best describe her as the kind of person who never just winged it. Her mornings were predictable. Shower, get dressed, do her makeup, and leave her condo around the same time each day to drive the short distance to work. The night before, she had spoken with her parents, Drew and Joyce, catching up after her trip with Rob. It was nothing out of the ordinary, just a warm conversation between a daughter and her family. Afterward, she unpacked some of her luggage, left her pajamas on the floor, and set out her things for the morning ahead. The small details left in her condo would later become haunting markers of a life interrupted. A damp towel in the bathroom, makeup on the counter, and clothes laid out for work. At around 10 p.m., Jennifer called Rob. They spoke for a while, the way they always did at the end of the day. They told each other good night, promised to talk again the next morning, and hung up. It was the last known contact anyone had with her. The next morning, Jennifer didn't show up for work. At first, her absence barely registered. People miss work for all kinds of reasons. But for Jennifer, it was different. She was punctual to a fault. If she was running late, she would always call. If she was sick, she would let someone know. Silence from her was completely out of character. Her manager at Central Florida Investments noticed her absence quickly. Jennifer was responsible, dependable. She didn't just not show up. By mid-morning, when she still hadn't arrived or called, concern started to build. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her boyfriend, Rob, who was expecting her morning call, also couldn't reach her. By the afternoon, alarm bells were ringing. Jennifer's parents, Drew and Joyce, lived 2 hours away, But when they heard she hadn't shown up to work and wasn't answering her phone, they immediately got in the car and drove to Orlando. Logan, her younger brother, also rushed to the scene. Something felt wrong, very wrong. When the family entered Jennifer's condo, what they found was eerie. Nothing was broken, nothing was overturned. There were no signs of a struggle inside, but the atmosphere was unsettling, as if Jennifer had simply vanished in the middle of her routine. The pajamas she had worn the night before were still on the bedroom floor. The damp towel in the bathroom suggested she had showered that morning. Her hairdryer was out, her makeup laid out, her clothes ready for work. Everything screamed routine. Everything screamed normalcy, except for one thing. Jennifer was gone. Even more troubling, several of her personal items were missing. Her keys, her purse, her cell phone, her work briefcase, and her iPod. Things she would take with her when she left for work. To investigators, it seemed clear she had left the condo that morning, prepared for her day. But somewhere between her front door and her arrival at work, she vanished. Her car, a black 2004 Chevy Malibu, was also missing. For the Kesse family, that was one of the most terrifying discoveries. It meant Jennifer hadn't just stepped out for a walk. She had left with the intention of driving somewhere, likely to work. But where she went after pulling out of the Mosaic at Millennia parking lot is a question no one has been able to answer. That first night without her was unbearable. Friends and family gathered, calling everyone they could think of, retracing Jennifer's steps, clinging to the hope that maybe there was some explanation. Maybe she'd had car trouble. Maybe she'd lost her phone. But deep down, they all felt it. This wasn't just a delay or an accident. Something far darker had happened to Jennifer, and within 48 hours, their worst fears would be confirmed when her car turned up just a mile away, parked in another apartment complex. A discovery that would only deepen the mystery and introduce the most chilling clue of all. 2 days after Jennifer vanished, a break in the case came, though it would only raise more questions than answers. On January 26, 2006, her black Chevy Malibu was found abandoned in a parking lot at another apartment complex called Huntington on the Green, just over a mile from her condo at Mosaic at Millennia. To the untrained eye, the car looked ordinary, as if it had simply been parked there by its owner. But Jennifer's family and investigators immediately knew it was anything but ordinary. The car had been deliberately placed there. It wasn't left in a random spot. It was lined up neatly, as if whoever drove it wanted it to blend in, to sit unnoticed among the other vehicles. When police examined the car, they found clues, though none of them brought the clarity everyone so desperately needed. There were no fingerprints, no obvious DNA. The steering wheel and other surfaces had been wiped down. But there was something strange on the exterior of the car, particularly the hood. There were what looked like impressions, marks that some investigators and later independent experts would describe as consistent with a violent struggle, as if someone had been pushed or slammed against it. Forensic photographs captured these faint impressions, haunting reminders of what might have been Jennifer's final moments. But the most unsettling clue wasn't on the car itself. It was on the surveillance cameras overlooking the lot. Investigators pulled the tapes, hoping for a breakthrough. And in a way, they got one. The footage showed the the Chevy Malibu being driven into the Huntington on the Green parking lot during the daylight hours of January 24th, the very day Jennifer disappeared. The driver pulled in, parked casually, waited inside the car for about 30 seconds, then stepped out and walked away. The figure was chilling. It wasn't Jennifer, it was someone else. Someone wearing what looked like work clothes, walking with calm confidence as if they knew exactly what they were doing. The grainy footage showed the person clearly enough to make out a body, a stride, and some clothing, but not the face. In a cruel twist of fate, every single shot of the person's head was obscured by the thick metal posts of the fence surrounding the complex. 3 frames, each one captured at the exact moment the person's face was blocked by the posts. It was as if the camera itself had conspired to erase their identity. Investigators were left with a ghost. The footage revealed what appeared to be a male figure, average build, around 5 feet 3 to 5 feet 5. But beyond that, almost nothing could be confirmed. His gait, his stance, the way his arms swung, it was all analyzed, slowed down, studied by experts. Some thought he might be wearing a uniform, perhaps construction attire, or even a painter's outfit. Others believed it could be a simple t-shirt and pants. The ambiguity only added to the torment. The driver of Jennifer's car was the single biggest lead in the case, and yet he was unidentifiable. No face, no clear distinguishing features, just a shadow slipping away into the background of one of Florida's most perplexing mysteries. For Jennifer's family, watching that footage was like staring into a nightmare. The person on the screen likely knew what had happened to Jennifer. He may have been the last person to see her alive, and yet, despite the technology, despite the hours of analysis, he remained untouchable. The discovery of the car and the footage should have brought answers. Instead, it dragged the case into deeper waters. Who was the man behind the wheel? How had he come into possession of Jennifer's car? And what did he do with Jennifer after that ordinary Tuesday morning when her life and the lives of everyone who loved her were shattered forever? In the first few days after Jennifer's disappearance, police scrambled to piece together a timeline, but almost immediately mistakes were made. The critical hours, the window where leads are fresh and witnesses still remember details, were lost. Jennifer's case was initially treated as if she might have left on her own, or as if she was simply late to work. It wasn't until her car was found that the investigation shifted into the realm of foul play. By then, precious time had slipped away. Detectives began by looking close to home. Statistically, when someone goes missing, the explanation is often found in the people closest to them. Naturally, investigators turned to Rob, Jennifer's boyfriend. He lived 3 hours away, but his alibi was airtight. Phone records confirmed his whereabouts, and his cooperation with police was immediate and genuine. Those who knew the couple described their relationship as healthy, stable, and loving. Rob was ruled out. Next came her family. Jennifer's parents, Drew and Joyce, had been the first to raise the alarm and were relentless in their search. Her younger brother, Logan, was equally cooperative. Police quickly cleared them, finding no reason to suspect the people who were fighting the hardest to bring Jennifer home. Attention soon shifted outward to the mosaic at Millennia Condominium Complex itself. At the time, the property was only partially completed. Entire buildings were still under construction. and a rotating crew of contractors and day laborers came and went every day. This detail became chilling in hindsight because Jennifer had already told her loved ones she often felt uncomfortable walking past groups of workers. She mentioned that they sometimes whistled or made comments, watching her more closely than she liked. She never reported it formally, but she didn't keep it a secret either. Theories began to take shape. Could one of these workers have noticed Jennifer's routine? Could someone have been watching, waiting for the moment she left her apartment in the early morning hours? It was plausible, but the challenge was enormous. There were dozens, perhaps even hundreds, of workers cycling through the site. Many of them were undocumented, paid under the table, and virtually untraceable. By the time police began asking questions, most had disappeared, gone on to other jobs, other states, maybe even out of the country. The investigation grew messy. The Orlando Police Department had limited resources, and the case quickly became overwhelming. They released still images from the surveillance video of the person abandoning Jennifer's car, hoping the public might recognize the walk, the clothing, the stance. The images spread quickly across news outlets, sparking endless speculation. But no one came forward with a definitive answer. The man in the footage remained faceless. Frustrations mounted as the weeks dragged on. Jennifer's parents criticized the police for moving too slowly, for failing to secure the mosaic construction logs, for not canvassing the area aggressively enough in those first critical hours. It felt as though opportunities had been squandered. Witnesses who might have seen something unusual were never identified. Surveillance footage from other nearby businesses wasn't secured in time. Still, police pursued leads. Co-workers were interviewed, friends were questioned, and the possibility of abduction by a stranger was considered. But the case seemed to stall almost immediately. Every time investigators thought they had a direction, the trail went cold. For the Kesse family, the lack of progress was agonizing. They began their own search efforts, printing flyers, organizing search parties, and hiring private investigators. Jennifer's face appeared on posters across Florida, her smile a constant reminder of the daughter, the sister, the friend who had been stolen away. Yet, despite the media coverage, despite the family's relentless push, the case refused to crack open. Jennifer's disappearance seemed to hover in a space between hope and despair. Someone, somewhere, knew what had happened to her, but that someone had managed to vanish as completely as Jennifer herself. As the weeks turned into months and months into years, Jennifer's case became one of the most agonizing mysteries in Florida. The initial search had faded, media attention had slowed, and yet the Kesse family refused to let their daughter's name slip into silence. Every anniversary, every birthday, every holiday that passed without Jennifer was unbearable. Her mother, Joyce, described it as living in a nightmare you can't wake up from. Drew, her father, turned his grief into relentless action. They spoke to news outlets, appeared on national programs, and kept Jennifer's face in the public eye. They believed, and still believe, that someone knows what happened, that there is a key to solving this case, buried under layers of indifference or fear. Frustration with law enforcement only grew stronger as time went on. The Kesse family began to feel that the Orlando Police Department wasn't doing enough, that leads weren't being followed, and that evidence was being mishandled. After years of pushing, they took a drastic step. They sued the Orlando Police Department for access to Jennifer's case files. In 2019, more than a decade after her disappearance, the family finally won. Over 16,000 pages of records, photos, and documents were turned over to them. It was both a victory and a heartbreak. A victory because they finally had control. Heartbreak because it underscored how much time had been wasted. Among the records and evidence, the family discovered things they hadn't been told before. Photos of Jennifer's car showed what appeared to be a violent encounter. Marks on the hood that looked like someone had been pressed or slammed against it. To the Kesses, it was proof of a struggle, proof that Jennifer had fought back. But to them, it also raised a bitter question. Why hadn't these details been emphasized years earlier, when they could have mattered most? Private investigators pored over the files, re-examining every lead. They came to believe strongly that Jennifer had likely been abducted in or near the parking lot of her condo, possibly by someone familiar with her routine. The theory that a worker, one of the countless men employed around the complex, might have targeted her resurfaced again and again. But identifying a specific suspect after so much time had passed was nearly impossible. In 2023, hope flickered again when the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, agreed to take a fresh look at the case, including retesting DNA evidence with modern technology. Advances in forensic science, especially in the use of genetic genealogy, have solved cases once thought unsolvable. For the Kesse family, it was a small but meaningful step forward. Yet, as of today, Jennifer's fate remains unknown. There is no body, no confirmed suspect, no closure, only questions. Who was the figure in the surveillance video? Was Jennifer followed from her condo? Was she attacked by someone she knew? Or was she the victim of a random predator? For her family, the fight has never stopped. They still operate a website, still share Jennifer's story, still beg anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. Nearly 2 decades later, their message remains the same. Jennifer was loved, she was valued, and she deserves to be found. The disappearance of Jennifer Kesse isn't just a cold case. It's a wound that is never healed, a haunting reminder of how quickly a life can vanish and how silence, even in the middle of a busy city, can swallow someone whole. Nearly 20 years have passed since Jennifer Kesse vanished, yet her story continues to resonate far beyond the streets of Orlando. Her case is more than a missing persons file. It's a reminder of the fragility of life, the randomness of danger, and the endurance of a family's love. Communities near Mosaic at Millennia and Huntington on the Green still whisper about Jennifer. Residents recall the unease that hung over the complex after her disappearance, the frantic search parties, the news crews swarming parking lots, and the countless flyers plastered on doors and poles. It was as if an ordinary neighborhood had been suddenly marked by the shadow of something terrible, and that shadow has never fully lifted. The surveillance footage of the unidentified man abandoning Jennifer's car remains one of the most chilling elements of the case. Experts continue to analyze the grainy frames, dissecting the angle of his shoulders, the way he held himself, the cadence of his steps. Every small detail is examined, theorized over, debated in forums and true crime communities, and yet no breakthrough has emerged. He remains faceless, just as Jennifer remains missing. For her family, the pain is ongoing. They have grown older, grayer, but their determination has only strengthened. Every lead, every tip, every renewed investigation is approached with hope and vigilance. They hold on to the possibility that Jennifer is alive, or that justice can finally be served. And in their persistence, they have inspired others not just to pay attention to unsolved cases, but to understand the human cost behind the statistics. Jennifer's disappearance also left a mark on law enforcement and the way missing persons cases are approached. Her case highlighted the importance of timely investigation, the potential consequences of delayed action, and the crucial role of surveillance footage, DNA, and community cooperation. It's a cautionary tale for both authorities and the public. Ordinary routines can be disrupted in an instant, and attention to small details can sometimes be the difference between finding someone and losing them forever. And so Jennifer Kesse's story remains unresolved, hanging in the balance between tragedy and mystery. We may never know exactly what happened on that January morning, who watched her, who took her, or where she might be. But we do know this: Jennifer was a young woman full of life, ambition, and love, and her absence has left a void that no passage of time can fill. The case is still open. Investigators are still listening, still analyzing, still hoping that someone somewhere will come forward. And until that day comes, Jennifer Kesse's story continues to haunt, to intrigue, and to remind us all that some mysteries are not just unsolved, they are unforgettable. Thank you for listening to Jennifer Kesse's story today. We'll be back next Thursday with another case file. Stay safe and keep paying attention to the details. They matter more than you think.